church friends. Thank you to all my church family. I can't say how much I appreciate all the fun gifts and your kindness you did. And you made my 60th birthday the best, Carol, which was a lot of fun this last Wednesday. And what a delight to surprise her and to be able to do something like that. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Oh. Well, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 48. Let's see here. Page 760. Jesus says, again you've heard it was said, said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord which you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends his rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You, therefore, must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Yeah. Well, we don't swear by stuff too much these days. People do a lot of cussing. It's gotten to be a pandemic of cussing almost everywhere you look. But that's not what Jesus is talking about. They had this habit of saying, you know, are you really going to do this? And someone would say, you know, I swear by God, I swear by the temple, or I swear by Jerusalem. Yes, I'm going to do this. And the problem is, it doesn't really matter how big the thing is that you're swearing by, because what really matters is, are you going to keep your word? You know, that's the real problem. Oh, man. So Jesus is saying that, you know, all these things that people swear by don't even belong to the person. They belong to God, or they belong to the king, or they belong to someone else. They aren't even there. So how can you control that? By Google, I promise, I'm telling the truth. Google said so, right? You know, science says so, or Harvard says so, or, yeah, I got the check in the mail, I'll send it to you. So the question that Jesus is talking about is, you know, are you keeping the promise that you made? In the Old Testament, they would make a vow to God, and they would promise to do something, to pay a certain amount, and there was a strong penalty for people that didn't keep their vows. But the problem is that we need to keep it in all the things we do. This is the core center of who we are. You know, in work, in business. One of the big problems, you know, when you go into a business and they don't do what they're supposed to do, or they do something else, or they don't do the right thing, you know, and so then you've got to go back and figure it out and talk to them, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. Don't you hate it when somebody has promised you something and it's not there? You know, and we call it bait and switch. You know, they'll promise you this, and then you come back in and you get that, and it's like, you know. So that's really the kind of thing that Jesus is saying. If you say you're going to do something, then you do it. If you're working for an employer and you agreed to work, this is one of the things that used to irritate me all the time, it still does. you know, a guy that comes and he agrees to work for somebody and they're going to do the work and then they don't do it. You know, or they show up late or they're lazy or they do the work haphazardly and, you know, and you're like, wow, okay. You know, it's exactly the same thing. You're promising to do something, you're not doing it. Yeah. Did you deliver what you needed to? Did you deliver what you could? And a part of that is, you know, to your family. Are you making promises to your spouse? Are you making promises to your kids and you don't keep them? You know, wow, that's really good. It causes all kinds of conflict and turmoil inside families and this kind of thing. So, you know, the big thing here is Jesus said, let your yes be yes. You know, it takes a lot of humility to do that because you got to properly evaluate what you can actually do. And I struggle with this a little bit myself because my tendency is when somebody's asking me to do something, my tendency is to accommodate them. I'm a very accommodating person. I'll say yes very quickly, and then I can't get it all done. And so it's like, wow, okay. So am I becoming a liar because I said yes to things, I can't get it finished? And I have to sit down and think to myself, can I really do that? You know, can I really get that done? Maybe I have the skill, do I have the time? Maybe I have the skill and the time, but is that the best priority? Is it the thing I should be doing? You know, so there's this thing where you have to stop. If you're going to let your yes be yes, and so that everything you say yes to, you actually do, you got to stop a little bit and think a little bit and back up and say, wow, you know, what can I actually get done? What's here? What do I actually have in my hands? Well, Jesus goes on to talk then about eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And, you know, that kind of thing is this revenge thing. When we lived in Southeast Asia, we'd be in meetings and we always had Papua New Guineans there with the big meetings with us. And in Papua New Guinea, they have this thing about the payback culture. So that if you hurt someone else's pig, they will kill your pig. You know, or they'll kill you. You know, and they had this big deal. They had a hospital there, the Church of Nazarenes had for ages. And the problem was that these tribes would get into tribal warfare because as soon as someone was hurt, the other tribe would come back and they would pay back somebody. And it would just keep going back and forth and back and forth. You pay back one, you pay back the next. You pay back one, you pay back the next. It was just this continuous warfare. And so they decided long ago as a hospital, this sounds really hard, but they had to do it, which was they would not treat axe wounds. That sounds really harsh, but the problem was that when people were chopped on by an axe, it was the middle of a fight. And if the hospital sewed them up, they'd get back into the fight. And so, you know, they had to let it go and let it die down. So there was this deal. If you're driving a car and you hit somebody's pig, you took off and you kept going, because if you didn't, they'd surround your car and you'd be dead. Wow. You know, this is a bad deal. One day, Dr. Cobb, our regional director at the time, he was with some of the important people that they were driving somewhere, and there had been a fight that was going on, and there were armed men that were standing in the middle of the road, and they were holding some guns, and they were trying to stop the car. Now, the thing about the Papua New Guineans is they're one of the world's friendliest people, even in the middle of a war. So Dr. Cobb, when he saw the guys with the gun, had everybody lean out the window and smile and start waving at them. And these guys looked, set their guns down and waved at him as they drove by. You know, sometimes you overcome evil with good. And yeah, but Jesus is saying, you know, don't take revenge. And we have this tendency when somebody hurts us, the human tendency is to pay back immediately. And Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't pay back. Don't be like the Papua New Guineans, keeping a fight going back and forth. Yeah. how many little brothers do this all the time. My brother still reminds me of the stuff I did to him when I was a kid. Yeah, there you go. So, Jesus goes on to mention somebody slapping somebody. Don't resist the one who's evil. He's saying, don't resist the one who's evil. We really have two choices. When somebody's doing something that hurts us, it's a bad business deal, or they actually physically hurt us in some way or whatever. We really only have the choice to try in some way to pay it back, or we have the choice to forgive it. And we absorb that pain, we just forgive it, we let it go. And so Jesus is saying forgive. Yeah. And then this idea of slapping. You ever had somebody who's just trying to get you stirred up? They're just going to poke you. They're going to make you go. And folks, sometimes it's our spouse. Sometimes it's our family. Sometimes, it's a person that we see is driving through an area and they want that parking spot. And, oh man, how are they going to get you stirred up? And so the whole idea is that if someone's coming along to stir you up to a fight, that's to turn the other cheek. Don't get in a fight. Don't get stirred up. And how do you do that? All these things come because we have God's help. We were just singing about who He is. And He comes and He helps us to have His perspective on that situation. We see things through the way He sees it, and it enables us to do something that by normal human standards a person wouldn't do. We become bigger than that situation. We become more loving than the situation. We become greater than the fight they're trying to pick. And we can turn that other cheek. James says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. So there are people trying to stir us up. And sometimes, they're just being mean, and sometimes they're being insulting. Sometimes they're persecuting us, literally, because of our faith in God. And we see this as becoming more common in the United States. We begin to see it more often here. But oftentimes we're just avoiding those situations. But there are people that are literally insulting us and demeaning us and trying to persecute us or maybe even strike us. And when we think about that kind of persecution as a Christian, as a little Christ, our response should be like His. If we have His mind, He was being beaten, going to the cross. What enabled Him to not destroy them? He could have. But He didn't. Because in that, His perspective was that He's trying to save them. That all that they're doing is a weakness and a fault and a sinfulness and a destruction, that they are headed to hell. And He doesn't want them to perish. And so when people are persecuting us, instead of becoming offended and worried and why are they insulting me? Let's change our mind a little bit and think about who this person is. Are they saved? Can they get to heaven this way? They're in danger. That's what enables us to turn the other cheek. It transforms from being about, oh, I got insulted or hurt. It becomes much more like a parent with a child who the child is striking at them or hurting them, and the parent's not insulted precisely. They're going to take care of the child because the child needs it. And in the same way we learn to love people the way God loves them, and we can absorb these things. You know what? Our life belongs to God. Our physical body is His temple. Our possession, He gave it to us. Our reputation is His. God's love for us is something that we can trust. We can trust His judgment. He's allowed us to be in this situation. We can trust His capacity. He knows what's going on with this. We can love our neighbor knowing that the evil he's doing is evidence of the spiritual condition they're in, and that enables us to absorb it and to pray for it. Jesus goes on to say, if someone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. Oh man, you ever dealt with a bill collector? No. Aren't they rather irritating? You know, they call you in the morning, they call you in the afternoon, they call you in the evening. There's a great way to get rid of a bill collector. You pay your bill. Usually they get rid of a bill collector. What's that? Yeah, it's sort of a strange concept, I know, but it's kind of in there someplace. So, but that's, why is somebody suing somebody to take their cloak? That's the point here. The idea is that if you had a short-term loan, you would promise that if you didn't pay back the loan in the right number of days, that you would give them your coat as a payment for the loan. And so in that story that Jesus is saying, if anyone sues you to take your cloak, everybody listening to him would have known exactly what he was talking about. They had made a short-term loan. They hadn't paid it back. Here comes the guy getting ready to take their coat because they hadn't paid him yet. And he says to them, it's kind of interesting. Don't just pay him back. Let him have your tunic as well. Pay him back and more. Pay him back and more. Wow. That's kind of interesting. Well, you know what? When we are wrong, we pay back. We make it hard. If we've borrowed money or we've done something we promised and we haven't been able to get it, we should overpay. I have run my own business a couple times, worked for lots of people. And when I was running my own business, my principle was that if I made a warranty, I'd keep it. And if it cost me, it cost me. And we'd go and fix the thing and make sure it was right and do it as quickly as possible. And sometimes I ended up paying out more than what I'd earned. It's just the way it goes sometimes. And so that's what Jesus is saying. If you've made a promise to do something, show that person that the relationship with them is more important than the number of bucks you're going to get. It's not about measuring, did we get, wow, I made this one, I made this warning, and I'm losing it, I'm starting to lose it, I can't do it, no, just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. Yeah. So we should avoid court. Think about this. If a bill collector has to put us into court, that means they've been pestering us for a while. Wow. So we need to avoid court. What a shame. But also, and this is, in this context, it would have been people that knew each other fairly well. In a small village or a town or someplace, we're in a little different context with the large city and the institutions that we have. But that relationship is more important than whether I'm comfortable tonight. Yeah, whether better to suffer loss of business or time at work or property or other kind of things. Don't make stuff the reason that you break a relationship. Especially when you're wrong with that. Yeah. By giving more than is strictly required, you show that you love that person more than the stuff and are willing to be their friend more than to hold on to some kind of monetary advantage. It's about how do I love someone, you see. Yeah, this is not impossible stuff, folks. It's not that terrible, difficult, and especially when we have the love of God. Now, Christians become poor. Sometimes people are caught in situations and things happen to them. They become ill or things break down and they're not able to do stuff. In our context where we are depending upon vehicles to get us somewhere and the vehicle breaks down, or you get caught in some stupid speed trap too many times and you end up losing your license and suddenly you can't drive and now you can't work and you're suddenly in poverty. Yeah. Yeah. You know what that is? That's our job. As a church. That's our job. Pay attention. See when people need that kind of help. What can we do? And that kind of gets us to this next one here. But not the next one. It's coming up soon, though. Well, the next one here is kind of interesting. It says, if anyone forces you to go a mile, go with him too. And maybe you've heard this story about what's happening here. The Roman soldiers were permitted to recruit someone to carry their pack for them. It was about a 90-pound pack. And they could recruit someone to carry that for a mile. At the same time in the Persian Empire, if they sent out a messenger in the Persian Empire, they would ride their horse until it was tired. They could hop off their horse at a place they could swap it. And it wasn't like already set up and official. He'd be just riding. He'd see a farm. He'd stop. The person had to swap animals with him. Take the tired one. They could get a fresh one and go on. Now, I got to say that when government officials are requiring you to do something, most of us get irritated. We don't like it. You know, why this regulation? Why this requirement? Why this thing that they have to do? And I've got to say that I've had my share of being irritated at government officials. And as I was studying for this sermon, I was like, wow, okay, so there it is. He's actually telling us to do something about that. Yeah. So here he is. He's got the legal right to force me to go with him a mile. And what's Jesus saying to do? He's saying, make the relationship with that soldier more important than how far you walk. Yeah. Make that relationship with that policeman who stops you more important than whether he's giving you a ticket or not. You know, make that relationship with that clerk that you're having to deal with, this giving you this thing, more important than, the tax you need to pay, or the fine you need to pay, or the things you have to go look for and search out, and I know how painful and difficult these things can be. They can be really frustrating sometimes. And we're so tempted to allow ourselves to be harsh and irritable and fussing at people. When we lived in the Philippines, we had a problem with the policemen who wanted to get lunch money, and they would try to extort lunch money from you. They'd stop you on the side of the road. They wouldn't write you a ticket. They would just sit there and say, well, if you give me so much money, then we'll just let this go. And we sat down as missionaries one time, because all of us had suffered from this, and we were wondering what to do with this thing and how do you deal with it. And we talked it over for quite a while and decided that it was not healthy for the policemen to do that. And not to just give them money, because it was allowing them to extort something. That was not what they were supposed to be doing. Now, this is, in Jesus' example, this is something he was legally right to do. So, when I began to do this, which is that they would pull me over and say I'd done whatever. It was always swerving was the word they would use all the time, swerving. You were swerving. I said, okay, well, please write me the ticket. Oh, you want a ticket? I was like, well, are you going to let me go? Well, no, you were swerving. Okay, well, then please write me a ticket. Well, do you really want a ticket? That's going to cost you 2,000 pesos, which was to them about 2 weeks worth of work. And so I was like, if that's what it costs, then I'll take that, but I'm not going to give you extra money to get out of this. So we started taking the tickets, and folks, in that context, when you would take one of these tickets, they would give you a little slip of paper that allowed you to drive. You had to go looking for where this was, and it was not easy to find. Manila's a difficult city to get around in, and just locating where to go pay your ticket would cost you a full day's work just to locate the place, stand in line, pay the ticket, and get back home. A full day, sometimes 10 hours worth of work just to do that. Okay? So when I'm saying to this police officer, well, if I have a ticket, then write me a ticket, please. He knows that I'm more willing to cost myself, more in gas money and time and effort and energy to pay that ticket plus the cost of the ticket than to give him, something that was actually illegal for him to ask me. Yeah. So, and that's the sense in which I was going the extra mile with him. It wasn't, that. So I had guys that would sit there and they would try to wrangle with me. And they would try, can they get me to do something? And so after several minutes of wrangling, I would say to them, look, I've got all day long, I'm a missionary. And I can teach you how to come to Christ. And if you'd like me to, I'll start telling you how to come to Christ. And if you don't want to know how to come to Christ, you can either let me go, or you can write me a ticket, or I can preach to you. So tell me, which one do you want? And at that time, what you have to decide with those things is that the thing I was trying to get to, because I'm driving somewhere, right? I have someplace I need to be, and I'm not like wasting time. And this guy is taking up a half an hour, sometimes 40 minutes of my time to do all this stuff. I have to decide that that person is more important, and what I'm dealing with him is more important. And that's the work that God has given to me, even if I'm not able to get this other thing done. To go the extra mile. But even more important, what's our attitude when we come up to these guys? When we have the person who's dealing with us and they're having to tell us some regulation or something we need to do, and it's not their regulation, they're the bureaucrat. Do we unload on them and make them have a miserable day? Or do we bless them and help them and make them feel like, they're appreciated? And that we understand that, none of us may like the thing that they need to do, but, that's what needs to be done. Yeah. Right, Steve? Yeah. Guys, ask Steve how he'd like to be treated as a township trustee. Yeah. We get that. So, yeah, there we go. What about the poor? Jesus said here, give to the one who begs from you. Do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. And begging. Folks, basically, a couple principles here. Give what you can. Don't send them to the government. I know we have all kinds of programs for things, but if someone's begging from you, they're begging from me, they're asking us for help. And so, we should do what we can do. Now, when I say what we can do, the worst in the world is these folks that are sitting at the side of a road with a little sign. You can't talk to them. You've got 20 seconds. They're not even that much time. Sometimes 2 or 3 seconds, to decide, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? What am I going to do? That's a horrible setup. I hate that setup. And you always want to drive by like, oh, should I stop? I can't do this, and traffic and danger and safety and all these kind of things. What do you do with that? It's a horrible thing to do. It's a manipulation, really. But I found that people that are poor and begging are often manipulative. They're often liars. People that are poor and begging, by the time they get to the point that they're begging for help, they're usually desperate. And they realize that if they can just, stretch the truth some, then they might get more help than if they were honest about what they were doing. Now, I saw one guy that was experimenting with this, and he actually took a sign, and he was videotaping himself. He took a sign, and on the sign it says, I'm too lazy to work, do what you can. And you know what? People still filled up his little bucket. At least he was honest about it, But it's amazing. People still fill up his bucket. But on the other hand, as times we have people that are in our communities that have gotten to the point that they're so desperate that they are begging for help. We should do what we can. Now, what we can means that we have some excess. We have some left over. We have something that is not owed. If we give that person help, and I'm thinking here, they need some significant help, and we're giving them significant help, that we're not taking money that we're actually owed to our bills. We're not paying our bill money to go help that person. That's not right, folks. That's stealing from one person to give to another. Pay your bills. What God gives us over those things. You know, we have something to share. Yeah. So don't be resentful. Yeah. Don't have a bad attitude. If someone's poor, at the very least you can do is to be kind with them and to be respectful with them and to pray for them. We can usually do something if we can't do it very much, you know. On the other hand, we need to be discerning. Just because someone's asking for help and they're saying they need this thing, that doesn't mean that's actually really what's going on, you know. And so you have to be discerning. You have to look and think. And that's the difference between Christian charity. Across the centuries, Christians have been discerning about what the person actually needs and how they help them. Probably the Salvation Army is like one of the world's best at these things. But we do that as a church. We look at people, we kind of discern what's going on, and we look at what their actual needs are and try to do the best we can that way. Yeah. Ask for a loan. Well, that's way better. You know, it's way better for a person to receive help as a loan than to receive just a gift. And that's because it keeps their dignity. You know, it keeps their dignity. You're not just having to help them out, you know, but they're just asking for a temporary thing. So, you know, make sure that you ask if they're going to give you your code if they don't pay you back, right? No. The point being that if you're going to give them a loan, give them a loan. If they don't have a way to pay it back, find a way they can pay it back with dignity. You know, is there some extra work they could do somewhere? Is there something they could do to work and get this done? You say, oh, well, they're already working and then they need to do extra work. It's okay. You know, folks, in my life, I've had times in my life where I spent 3 months working on 2 or 3 hours of sleep. You know, I'm still alive. I think I am. But, you know, it's okay. It's okay. If you give somebody work to do something and they have to work hard to get it done, it gives them dignity. And better to loan them the cash and give them dignity, and they don't have enough cash to pay back, you can do something else. You know, what is that? But Jesus is saying that's love for our neighbor, with the poor, what God has given them in terms of strength. So Jesus goes on, wrapping up here. He said, "You've heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Yes. Bless those who curse you. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust." And so here, they are loving the people that are hurting them. Bless those, love your enemy. Bless those who curse you. Yeah. You know what? Sometimes our families curse us. We need to return a blessing to them. Quiets down lots of fights. Sometimes it's an angry customer coming in and they're all upset. I've had to deal with those lots of times. And, you know, when you give a kind word back to them, or an apology if they need it, or a listening ear, and echo back what they say, bless those who curse you. Political enemies. I saw a video of a man that had gone, he was a Christian, had one of these vests with Jesus Saves all over the vest, a big sign that says Jesus Saves, and he'd gone to a pro-abortion rally and was there talking to the people, and they were just cursing him and yelling at him and all kinds of awful stuff. And he, with a smile on his face, was blessing them and telling them how much he loved them. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there it is. It's exactly what Jesus is saying. Yeah, political enemies even. Pray for those who mistreat and persecute you. You know, some people we can't change. Some people we can't do anything except pray. And Jesus is here saying, you know what? Praying for sinners is a good thing. How do you know who the sinners are? Well, when they're unjustly persecuting you and hurting you, you got a good idea who needs prayed for. So, pray for them. Yeah. And he says, greet those who are your enemies. Yeah. So, folks, again, there's this temptation. Somebody's been hurting me. We want to run and hide. The thing with the fight, you get into a fight with folks, you have the biggest tendency is to either get back into a fight and become violent, or to run away and escape the whole thing. And in either case, you're not smiling and saying hello, right? But the way that is the best to deal with a conflict is to face the person and to talk about the conflict if possible. But if nothing else, at least treat them politely. At least treat them with dignity. At least show them that, whatever the conflict is, you still believe they're a person. And that they're worthy of at least the respect of a smile and a greeting and a hello. Wow, it does a lot. It does a lot. Over the years, one of the things I've found is as I've worked in so many different kinds of places, dozens of places, dozens of countries, I've often had people that were angry at me. And I found that if I call it just living it down, which means that if you stay with the person long enough and you treat them kindly enough and you work with them long enough, that they begin to turn around and to change their mind. And sometimes this takes a couple of years, sometimes even longer, but they come around. Majority of them do. And so, when you get into a fight and you make them your enemy and you never talk to them again, well, not much there. You can't fix that very well. Yeah. So be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Yeah. What's Jesus mean? Does he mean that I'm never going to get irritated? No, that's not what he means. We're going to get irritated. But what do we do with it? Just recently it was in the middle of a business I'm working in, and we were talking with another company, had a customer that called us up, and this other company had said something bad about us, and I was angry. I was angry. But what do you do with the anger, I didn't stop talking to them. I just determined I'm going to do an even better job, So I'm going to focus my anger to do the best job I can with the customers we have and to compete as well as we can and, pray for them. And that's, so being angry is not a problem, but being angry and sinning, that's a problem. But being perfect is, our Father in heaven is perfect. Say, well, that's impossible. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. God can give us his strength to see things from his perspective and to do the things that need to be done. I wanted to go back for one thing, just for a moment. Back in the beginning when I was talking about telling the truth, one thing I wanted to say, I put it in my outline here, I didn't get to it, which is that, folks, if you have somebody who's trying to break into your house, and they break into your house and they're asking you where you keep your money, you don't need to tell them that. There's no requirement here that we tell people something that's going to hurt us. If we have a person who's mentally ill, and unfortunately we have more and more of those that are walking around in the street that are literally violently mentally ill, we don't need to share with them all the intimate details of our life in order for them to hurt us. Okay? We don't, if they're asking where something is, we don't have to give them the right answer to help them do something that would be harmful or hurtful for other people. That's not a lie. It's no different than, putting up self-protection in some way. That's not the same thing, okay? Some people get this weird trap of being so bound to be truthful that no matter what it is someone asks them, they have to tell them the exact truth about that thing. And even God doesn't do that. How many things have you asked God about and he hasn't shared a word? He doesn't tell us everything. And there's a good reason why he doesn't. It would hurt us. We don't have the capacity to handle those things. And sometimes he leaves us with questions about things that we don't know or understand. All I'm saying is this, which is in the process of being truthful, in the process of keeping your promise, don't make a false application of that to something that is way past and not what Jesus was intending. Let's be wise in what we do, be careful and honest. in all that we do. So, folks, if you say yes, mean yes. You know, if you're in a bad business or government situation, be as much of a blessing to the people as you can be. You know, if people are angry with you, still say hello. Yeah. Yeah, let's stand. Lord Jesus, we trust you this day. And Father, as we are salt and light, I pray, Lord God, that you'd help us to make, Lord, a good application in all that we do. Father, you're able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine. We trust you for these things. We praise you for these things. We glorify your name. Thank you for teaching us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well,